Hey guys, today we have a this year recollection and collection of worst, best, most scandalous or most idiotic events in gaming and gaming adjacent fields in 2024. This is gonna be a long video, so make yourself comfortable. I'm gonna provide a lot of screenshots here so that you can see them all as a proof and maybe Google something later to find all the information if you want it. And I'm not gonna read all the screenshots out loud because that would take too much time, but I will go over all the events in terms of their narratives and the general idea of those events so that you can listen to the video while playing a game, for example, and still get all the info about what actually happened. Let us start from January 2024. Probably the biggest scandal of that month wasn't strictly gaming, but it was discussed by gamers a lot, because it concerns us too. It was a wave of discussions on Western anime manga localizers, or vocalizers as they were called.
And also, going beyond just Katrina, people don't forget, these are all just random tweets of localizers boasting about abusing their power and their trust as a translator. And I think this one really just sums it up the best. It says, the true joy of localization really is seeing what you can get away with. And that attitude has been completely masked off for many years.
The whole thing was about the fact that number of Western localizers were caught red-handed throughout many years, butchering original Japanese meanings, inserting leftist ideological and political messages to anime when they were not present in the original, changing language, infesting text with dubious slang and Reddit jokes, and a lot more.
That they're not fit for Western audiences.
Uh-huh.
She's also the one who was criticizing many shonen manga for catering to teenage boys. And it goes.
Aren't shonen manga made for teenage boys? Well, it's not enough for her to have her own stupid fucking animes that she likes. She's got to go into our stuff and ruin it. She's got to ruin our stuff. Shonen means teenage boys.
And even if you don't watch anime itself, you might imagine how having environment where Japanese original is so disrespected, or the environment where ideological censorship is a norm, can easily infect gaming industry too, and then, for example, you will have a perfectly fine game feeling like it is a woke fest simply because localizers changed original so much, which would be a significant problem as gamers become less and less tolerant to wokeness in games, so we also have to keep an eye on translation quality. So anyway, many content creators covered this topic. A lot of people express satisfaction about the potential of AI usage in this field, because hopefully AI will be less inclined to destroy originals. And actually, one of the most notable releases of January, Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth, was part of this controversy later in that month, because some of the lines of the original were changed so that they started to sound more woke basically, which just underlines the fact that this issue goes beyond anime and manga. In case of Infinite Wealth, it was most likely a fault of a publisher, which is Sega. Either they are hiring activists and they don't have any quality control, or they support it, thinking that Westerners should be fed wokeified version of the game. Then Capcom got in big troubles with gamers being annoyed at their DRM called Enigma Protector, which at that point was assumed to be their tool of choice to block unwanted modding. Because you see, before that, Capcom got really mad at mods, and not just at nude mods, but it seemed like they're gonna crack down on any kind of mods because they started to call them cheating and treated them as something highly illegal. They sent copyright strikes and takedown requests to creators who posted videos with modded Capcom games, like here. Team Darkside posted about receiving takedown requests and strikes, and about other Monster Hunter channels being deleted because of the strikes. To be honest, I'm kinda out of the loop here and I don't really follow this particular drama further, so maybe someone can post clarification on how it ended. But generally speaking, it seems like Capcom stopped their shady activity in regards to mods and modded game videos. January was also a month when we got this infamous quote from Ubisoft executive about getting comfortable with not owning our games. Now, to be fair, this line was taken out of the context since the Ubisoft guy was answering to the question on what would make gamers more tolerant to subscription model. So his answer was kind of logical, like, well, it would require them to being more comfortable with not owning their games. In this context, it's not some kind of threat, and he says that he understands that people love to own games and stuff like this. But people already heavily disliked Ubisoft by this time, so when media and content creators took that phrase out of the context, everyone just rolled with it and phrase was turned into a symbol or a meme. But then again, even though that this particular dialogue wasn't as bad as you thought, Ubisoft in general does promote subscription model a lot. They do manipulate their pricing and the schedule of their game releases so that subscription model looks better and so that you would stay hooked while not really owning anything. And as we know already, Ubisoft is not a reliable provider of services. So at the end of the day, screw them anyway. A news that technically occurred on December 2023 but was mostly discussed in January 2024. A very dedicated teenager has beaten original Tetris and crashed it on a level 157, an event that symbolically coincided with Tetris celebrating its anniversary. It is a 40 years old game now. Also, January was a month of Palworld, its success and its controversies. Journalists were mad and dedicated quite a lot of time to bashing this indie game. And just like any other month, it was a good month in terms of providing me with ideas for parody because journalists kept writing gems like this one, for example, on virtual animal abuse and cruelty in Palworld. Not gonna lie, it was kind of strange to see a bunch of people who normally support mutilating kids in real life pretending to be some kind of moral beacons in virtual worlds. Apparently, many of them were also salty at the fact that someone has managed to sell millions of copies in first months without any support of journalists. Plus, they probably wanted to show Nintendo how they defend them. By the way, yeah, shortly after Palworld release, Nintendo said that they will investigate it on copyright infringement. February 2024. In February, we got a Tomb Raider 1.3 remastered, which wasn't a bad thing per se, but it came with some controversy because of this ridiculous trigger warning they had. This was so cringe that it almost felt like a jab against the game itself, packed within a game, which again just so unnecessary and stupid that it got into the news. The trigger warning, by the way, if you don't remember, it was following. The games in this collection contain offensive depictions of people and cultures rooted in racial and ethnic prejudices. These stereotypes are deeply harmful, inexcusable, and do not align with our values at Crystal Dynamics. Rather than removing this content, we have chosen to present it here in its original form, unaltered, in the hopes that we may acknowledge its harmful impact and learn from it. Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League was also released in February, with a very low number of players at the start. A game that had a Sweet Baby Ink death mark on it did what you would expect from it. It flopped. In a month, it dropped to absolutely abysmal stats and into a total irrelevancy, and only some content creators kept covering it just for giggles, I guess. Spoiler alert! Through incredible efforts of developers who later introduced a very cool gender or race swapped and relatable characters like this very attractive lesbian or an ethical black thief, game was saved from being tortured forever, and it was announced that the game will be put out of its misery in January 2025. What a glorious year it had. Back to the Ubisoft again. In the company's sales report, Ubisoft CEO Yves Guillemot stated, "This quarter provided us with positive momentum and marks the beginning of our turnaround to consistently creating and delivering high quality, long lasting games." Which sounded good, but just a week after this, they released Skulls and Bones, the famous, or rather infamous, first quadruple A game, heavily criticized for being inferior even to some older games and having zero signs of quadruple A quality. This game costed a fortune and it needed a lot of sales to make it profitable, and from what we know, it was quite a painful flop. Another very dedicated player has reached a level 1337 at Skyrim, completed every quest, looted every item, every weapon, every armor piece, everything, and has essentially completed the game in the most literal meaning of this word. In February, Stellar Blade controversies also started to appear or reappear here and there, with some new attacks emerging and older attacks resurfacing due to the upcoming release date and release of a gameplay trailer. But it is safe to say that in general, February was a month of Helldivers 2 and its astonishing success that almost turned it into some kind of socio-cultural phenomenon. At this point, it looked like we had our game of the year. It sold a lot of copies, it had huge player base, it was everywhere, on every social network, in every video, in memes, in references, literally everywhere. By this time, you know that they had some big problems later on, but in February it was the biggest event. March 2024. Now, in March, we had a huge gaming mega event that shaped future as we know it. Technically, it started during the last days of February, but it unfolded in March, so I'm putting it here. The GamerGate 2. Chris Kindred, at that time a narrative designer and writer at DEI consultancy company Sweet Baby Inc., or SBI, posted on X calling for a mass report campaign against Brazilian gamer Cabrutus, who was running a curator list on Steam identifying games with SBI involvement. Chris Kindred wanted to achieve Steam ban for Cabrutus and wanted to destroy his account, but achieved something very different. From a relatively niche list known to less than 20,000 of users, Cabrutus' creator list has grown up to an almost 500,000 followers due to all the exposure it got. Sweet Baby Inc. Detected List, which was later renamed into DEI Detected List, has become famous, and SBI became famous too, even though they clearly regret it. Kotaku and other gaming journals rushed to help Sweet Baby Inc., trying to downplay their involvement in gaming industry, but it was just too late. Then another outlet tried to influence Valve, but by this time you probably know that this attempt to suppress gamers failed too. There were a whole bunch of similar attempts to portray Sweet Baby Inc. as a victim, a lot of attacks on Steam curator list, and on gamers in general. But most of them failed to reach their goals and just made more gamers aware of what is going on. Obviously, it wasn't limited by month of March and actively went on for a long time after it. These events had a huge impact. Gamers saw these bad faith actors in action, and not only SBI but DEI practices in general made it into a general gaming discussions. One of the most notable releases in this month was Dragon Dogma 2, which unfortunately not only had a Denuva cancer in it, but also according to players it had a bunch of serious technical problems with stability and performance, and some noticeable downgrades compared to the original. Sadly, I had to pass on this game as I don't want to pay for any games featuring Denuva DRM, but from what I gathered and looking at the Steam rating, it was a somewhat lackluster game that failed to live up to the name of its famous ancestors, so I'm not that sad at the end of the day. A game featuring Nikocado Avocado was released during March too, where they, for some reason, renamed him into some kind of alloy. What the just leave a name we know, guys. Anyway, it is a game where he runs around and kills some kind of robotic animals. Oh, and another bunch of Stellar Blade controversies dropped as devs released a demo. It was a classical takes on how Bayonetta and 2B are great, but this latest thing, it's just a doll for a male gaze, and some more. Also, Helldiver 2 community manager started to damage company reputation, because this is what community manager usually do these days. And lastly, the famous Sweet Baby Inc. founder's speech was posted everywhere, as this short video pretty much explained in 2 words how this woke bullying works.
If you're a creative working in AAA, which I did for many, many years, put this stuff up to your higher ups. And if they don't see the value in what you're asking for when you ask for consultants, when you ask for research, go have a coffee with your marketing team and just terrify them with the possibility of what's going to happen if they don't give you what you want.
April 2024. April had a lot of GamerGate stories continue, like another consultancy group tried to attack an outspoken gaming outlet, That Park Place, and send them cease and desist letter. Alyssa Mercante tried to mass report Grams, and then yet another consultancy company called NNE Saga tried to join cancel campaign against Grams. Anyway, normal stuff at this point. IGN has publicly apologized to devs of Stellar Blade for their infamous IGN France article where they called Eve a doll sexualized by someone who you would think never saw a woman. But then Grams brought up a very recent comment made by IGN France editor-in-chief, which was 10 times worse than the previous article, and that editor even claimed that women are killed because of standards set by games like Stellar Blade, and blamed gamers on being fragile because of patriarchy. Which reminded everyone again that IGN still sucks. Then we had a whole storm with Star Wars Outlaws. First of all, it had ridiculous pricing, which felt like its only goal is to push people towards subscription. This pricing made no sense then, and it makes even less sense now, when we know what this game was and how little impact it had. Then main protagonist was memed into oblivion because of her looks, or rather how they were so different from a real life model they had. Star Wars Outlaws thus joined the long list of games that had downgraded attractiveness of their female protagonist on purpose. Alan Wake 2, not a particularly successful game associated with Sweet Baby Inc., attracted the wrong type of attention because a whole army of bots were praising it for lowering system requirements. If you look for some of these happy users now, you will realize that most of them are suspended on X, so yeah, they were bots. Later, Ubisoft was caught doing the same for Star Wars Outlaws, by the way. Then Capcom got in troubles when its own localization team's profile on X posted bunch of insights on how they approach localization, and the worst fears of gamers happen to be true. It is basically a censorship department that fully embraces the idea of butchering games for Western audiences because they believe that Westerners have to be fed woke content. On a gaming adjacent field of Warhammer 40k, there was a move towards much needed loss of respect and trust, towards inclusivity and diversity, with Game Workshop inventing the so-called female custodes. Ubisoft has delisted their racing game called The Crew. Now, it wouldn't be that crazy if they just delisted it from stores, but the nature of the game and the way it was tied to Ubisoft servers and online connection meant that people can't play this fully priced game with microtransactions and DLCs, even in solo mode against bots. This once again made many gamers aware of the fact that always online games are indeed cancer, and you should never really trust those claims about you keeping your access to the game forever when infrastructure itself ties it to some kind of service or servers. The crew incident caused a lot of debates, and this game was actually a reason for a Stop Killing Games movement and their famous petition to make it obligatory for publishers to preserve access to the games, to protect the rights of the customers who bought it. And the last part of April was a whole bunch of Stellar Blade controversies, with them changing some outfits, changing some graffitis in games, and players pushing against it, and journalists and activists being mad at gamers, with some activists putting a bounty on Grams because of him being outspoken on these Stellar Blade issues. Now, I'm gonna stop right here, otherwise, this month will never end. It was a wild one. May 2024. The first part of May has seen pretty big controversy with Helldivers 2 enforcing mandatory PSN account linking, even though for all this time people who bought it on Steam were not required to have a PSN account. The whole thing was one big unmitigated disaster with a lot of conflicting information, a lot of misinformation, like the one where they stated that people from countries not eligible for PSN accounts will be exempted from the requirement, but then made it impossible for them to access game anyway. All parties looked bad. Sony for setting and demanding this requirement, and Arrowhead for baiting people into the game even though they knew they will have to kick them out later. Helldivers got a whole bunch of negative reviews and refunds and lost good chunk of players, but it was the public image that suffered the most. After this controversy with thousands of fans and content creators across the world not being able to access the game, Helldivers 2 hype has quickly dried up, and from the media phenomenon, game was demoted into just another game kind of category. They also got in troubles with some of their Discord mods being woke, power hungry activists and banning people for opinions or even for emojis. They got all those weapon balancing controversies, and all of this just tarnished the game's reputation. It is a still popular game anyway, but they never saw that mega hype after that. Then the whole internet has been mocking Ubisoft's Assassin's Creed Shadows with its black pansexual samurai protagonist, which was declared as one of the most outrageously and ridiculously out of the place DEI characters ever. It started a wave of debates that led to discoveries like the one about the guy who wrote books about Yasuke being a total fraud who lies on Wikipedia, and multitudes of examples of Ubisoft being really bad at recreating historically accurate settings, stealing assets or disrespecting sacred imagery. Also later they got in troubles with the treatment of Japanese symbols like those damaged torii gates and many more. It was so bad that it reached Japan's media space and got a lot of backlash from Japanese gamers and even historians. The day Ubisoft released Assassin's Creed Shadow trailer, the reaction was so bad that even their stock price dropped. On top of its dubious protagonist, the game drew a lot of criticism due to its pricing, as it followed Star Wars Outlaws price model when it just looks so bad that it kind of baits people into subscription and does also into this you will own nothing model. And the third big scandal was the attacks from gaming journals on SmashJT and his website that featured a list of gaming journalists, activists, specifically those at Kotaku and their allies, with information about their dubious activity in a public space. First, Kotaku senior editor Alyssa Mercante contacted SmashJT wife, so apparently to shame her about her husband or something. Then she threatened to sue SmashJT, and then another friend of this clique of journalists slash activists, Nick Calandra, organized a mass reporting against SmashJT's website and managed to take it down to the delight of Alyssa Mercante and her friends. However, the celebration didn't last long as the hosting provider has reinstated the website after looking into the situation and realizing that those reports were false, and SmashJT website holds only publicly available information without anything personal. Also, on May 30, the PlayStation's State of Play introduced the one and only Concord, with its legendary pronouncers for robots and superior character design. And it occupied almost a third of the whole video length. Interestingly, that in the same State of Play they showcased Infinity Nikki and Marvel Rivals, which just makes the contrast even funnier. How on earth someone at Sony watched that video and couldn't see who is gonna flop? June 2024. Former World of Warcraft team lead Mark Kern, aka Grumps, says that his sources indicated that Concord's developer Firewalk Studios knows about reaction their game has caused, but they just don't care and they are calling it a white noise. Well, that didn't age well for Firewalk Studios. On the other hand, a thing that kind of ended up just like some people predicted from the very beginning, Dragon Age Veilguard, that released its trailer in June. It was heavily criticized both for its art style and for the information developers pushed alongside with the trailer about every character being lame and gay, etc. But I gotta say, even the harshest critics could not predict how much of a cringe fest it will become at the end of the day. Black Myth Wukong reaches top of Steam list of most wishlisted games, despite some gaming journalists and outlets running a smear campaign against its developers. For example, under a positive article from one of their journalists, IGN has immediately placed a note from Rebecca Valentine, who was lamenting sexism and lack of women in a game. Elden Ring's DLC Shadow of the Erdtree sells over 5 million of copies in 3 days after release, which proves that having great and stylish death screen makes games successful. But if serious, I just hope I get a free time one day to dedicate to DLC too. In June we got this infamous moment.
I want people in the industry to be a little bit louder about people being mean to other people. And maybe say it's not a good thing.
Yeah.
Maybe say we don't want you around if you're gonna be a cunt
Yeah.
and hateful. And that the games industry is diverse naturally. Not because anyone's making them be diverse. Because the world is diverse, you stupid motherfucker. And if you have a problem with that, come fight me. Physically. Bitch.
Has anyone taken you up on that yet?
No.
At that time, senior editor at Kotaku, Alyssa Mercante, continued to defend ideological infestation in games and challenged opponents to fight her physically. Number of women in gaming industry posted about their willingness to accept the challenge, but Alyssa ducked them all. Then the star of GamerGate 2, Chris Kindred, after his unsuccessful attempt to ban Cabrutus from Steam, contacts employer of SmashJT in attempt to get him fired from his job. However, Chris Kindred only managed to embarrass himself as he contacted former employer, which had nothing to do with SmashJT anymore. In June, one of the biggest gaming streamers, Dr. Disrespect, was accused by some former Twitch employee of sexting a minor and trying to arrange a meeting with her. In the following chain of events, number of people associated with Dr. Disrespect rushed to sever their ties with him without waiting for any kind of investigation, with Dr. Disrespect losing monetization and some sponsors too. Fast forward, it all ended up as one huge nothing burger and just ruined a bunch of relationships, and pretty much up to this point nobody can tell anything about that incident, as everything remains on a level of two hostile parties telling nasty things about each other. July 2024. Zenless Zone Zero reaches 50 million downloads, while Dead Rising Remake gets into trouble for its trailer when people start to notice bunch of dubious changes and signs of censorship. Folks starting to remember the infamous Capcom localization team's posts on X, where they pretty much acknowledged censorship, and people start to connect the dots. Similar controversies starting to appear about Dragon Quest Remake, with information about removing of male and female choices from character selection. Later on, developers will acknowledge that this kind of censorship is done specifically for the West. CDPR starts to appear more and more frequently as a company infested with activists, as they hire Mary Kenny, a fan and defender of Sweet Baby Inc. and former Insomniac narrative director who got famous for her desire to aggressively push LGBTQ agendas into the games. Then the first descendant enters the chat and, as time goes, becomes a main hero of the whole meme genre, Western devs versus Korean devs. And then also, a group of woke schizoids have accused Hoyoverse, developers of games like Genshin Impact and Honkai Star Rail, of cultural appropriation and whitewashing of their completely fictional characters belonging to completely fictional ethnicities. Activists demanded from Hoyoverse full commitment to DEI principles. Not gonna lie, it was pretty funny drama and gave us a chance for a really good laugh. Also, not particularly noteworthy, but still, another SBI affiliated and DEI heavy game, Flintlock The Siege of Dawn, gets released on PC with a very low numbers of players and pretty much gets into a dead on arrival category. Sweet Baby Inc. death mark of slop plus gamers not wanting to pay for that slop, all of it pretty much dooms this game in a very short time. And meanwhile, open beta for a future of Sony PlayStation, meaning Concord, fails to reach 2500 players. At this point, everyone already knew how it's gonna end, but it gave us some time to create bunch of memes during next month anyways. Especially when information about some of the devs was leaked, especially that one, Legend, called Professor. Remember Professor? August 2024. As Star Wars Outlaws gathered more and more criticism, creative director of this game reacted to controversies, but not in a way you would expect from someone who tries to increase the sales of commercial product. Basically, he dismissed everything and said that debates on protagonists' looks are not worth engaging with. Not only it meant that he antagonized quite a lot of people, he further widened divide between Ubisoft and gamers in general with this attitude. Also, Star Wars Outlaws, a game with one of the largest marketing budgets, according to Ubisoft CEO, got into a big scandal with Ubisoft's attempts to influence reviews for the upcoming release. Essentially, people discovered that significant number of influencers praising this game were flown to California, which sounds like a punishment to me, but whatever, were sent to boat tours, were sent to Disneyland with VIP tours, they got 4 hours game session, so they got early access to the game, and in general Ubisoft really buttered them up. Black Myth Wukong is released and it reaches almost 2.5 million of players at its peak. The story of this game is pretty ironic when you think about it. In the Western Hemisphere, it was significantly boosted by controversy, pretty much in the same style as Hogwarts Legacy, with many players giving it a try simply because it came under attack of journalists and activists. For this reason, it almost was forgiven for being anti-consumer in terms of pushing and normalizing the nouveau DRM, which is obviously detrimental to gamers and customers in general. Its qualities are still debated, with some people saying that it fully deserved the praise and others saying that it's not a Game of the Year material. I can't really comment on this one, but in any case it was a successful game with a player base that is still going pretty strong. By the way, remember that Hoyoverse boycott from before? Well, Hoyoverse's revenue has grown by 10%. Apparently, modern audiences are not as numerous as they think they are. Surely they couldn't be serious with that boycott.
I am serious. And don't call me Shirley.
But there was a game specifically for them, Dustborn, a game so woke that I thought it is created as a parody by some trolls. But apparently no, it wasn't a satire or anything like this. To be honest, looking at its player count, I think that only streamers and content creators played it for content farming and lulz. It was a good addition to meme collection anyways. A Concord dev almost successfully predicted Concord's future when he said that developers are strapped in and ready to push it for years to come. Almost precise prediction with a tiny miscalculation. A legendary wheelchair operator from Rainbow Six Siege was leaked in August. And later, when it was officially revealed, everyone at the Starbucks just stood up and clapped. They did the meme. Yeah, they truly did. It wasn't just wheelchair, by the way. The looks of this operator were also pretty damn typical in the best DEI fashion, with a face that could make you Google whether it's supposed to be a woman or a man. But I guess Ubisoft is doing all of this for a very special audience like this one, and they have long abandoned the rule of cool. And finally, we had a Soul Ash 2 controversy, when solo developer of Soul Ash series said that he is not planning on implementing the so-called same-sex marriage in this game. LGBTQ++ Extended Season Pass Edition activists got butthurt, and as usually their tone quickly changed to an anger, negative review posting and demands in response to what developer Artur Smirkovsky posted on X, that he's not gonna be bullied by a certain entitled group of people and won't change his decision. This caused a wave of organized review bombing, but it was relatively quickly countered when the word about game dev and his confrontation with woke zombies reached more people. This was one of those cases that showed gaming world that for every ideological activist, there are at least 5 more normal gamers who are interested in games that don't bend the knee, figuratively speaking. September 2024. Concord gets shut down in just 2 weeks after release. Game was an absolute disaster with cringe roster of DEI characters whose only noticeable success was to serve as a meme material for the internet. As Concord miserably failed with its modern audience's characters, woke activists tried to remain ignorant and coped for the next months on all social networks. Remedy's senior community manager pretended that modern audiences are somewhere out there and you just have to bring them into gaming communities while kicking out bigots. A podcaster, Halif Adams, whom I only know from his constant shilling on X, called for removing bad faith actors too, as if it somehow would save DEI flops or somehow would increase their sales. Gaming journalists cried about Sony not giving Concord a chance, etc., etc. All of them were pissed off about Chads getting their victory instead of realizing that wokeness just creates a cringe overdose and people in general prefer something cool and engaging. And all of this cope continues. People bring up opinions like this one from Concord devs, where they called critics bunch of talentless freaks, as if those critics and freaks were not meant to actually pay for the product you produce, you know? An account allegedly belonging to the Saber Interactive CEO, Matthew Karch, made waves with a comment under a video where Asmongold discussed Legendary Drops video on Space Marine 2. With this short comment, Matthew managed to create a very good impression of his company and his game when he said that their team just wanted to create old school fun game and that he's not a big fan of messaging and agendas pushed by some other companies. Of course, activists and journalists were mad again. For example, this Kotaku journalist called that comment anti-woke crusader slop. Some woke redditors tried to cope, claiming that no one would ever comment on Asmongold video. But when asked about this comment on LinkedIn, Karch wasn't denying that it was him and made a joking compliment to the comment. As for Space Marine 2, it was released with very good numbers of players, selling around 2.5 million of copies in first month, and it got very positive rating on Steam. Ghost of Tsushima sort of sequel called Ghost of Yotei got some mixed reactions as they changed protagonist to a female. Initially, this controversy hasn't really got anywhere as there wasn't much information about the game. It was mostly about this game getting into the concerning trend of swapping protagonists. However, later, more information resurfaced about Sucker Punch, about voice actress being a woke activist, a bunch of devs being activists, with Sucker Punch participating in woke activities like the one seen on the screenshot, where it says that this weekend workshop is open to girls and non-binary kids only, ages 11 to 14. Non-binary kids? All of this made people suspect that change of protagonists could be caused by some agendas and may come with a bunch of extra ideological stuff on top of it. September also has seen bunch of fights that DEI activists and journalists had with SmashJT channel. At first, Black Girl Gamers, a DEI consultancy group that worked on Forspoken, for example, sent copyright strike at SmashJT channel, and later that month, senior editor at Kotaku, Alyssa Mercante, sent cease and desist letter to SmashJT. October 2024. Now, October was packed with stuff. Starfield's DLC Shattered Space, released on September 30, has been gathering all kind of horrible reviews throughout October and reached an impressive 30% of positive reviews, thus becoming worst rated Bethesda product on Steam. I don't know whether it is truly so bad, because after trying twice to slog through Starfield and failing to do so twice, I decided not to bother with DLC at all. As Western developers faced layoffs, From Software has announced salary increases. Freaking traitors! Couldn't they hide it? Probably they're just saving money on DEI initiatives or something, but in any case, it's not fair. And then, as if Ubisoft wasn't in a big troubles already, suddenly their monetization director posted an angry letter on LinkedIn where he lashed against gamers and haters who are wishing ill to companies. Considering his position as monetization director, it was pretty funny to see him saying that we are all on the same boat. Out of all people, it had to be that guy. And on the note of Ubisoft, while they had problems throughout the whole year, I believe it was October when rumors about Tencent aiming at buying out Ubisoft appeared, which later led to a bunch of other dramas about what is truly going on there. Like, is Tencent tanking company's stock price on purpose before they buy it out? Or maybe they're doing it together with Guillemot family, crippling company on purpose? Or maybe they were actually truly incompetent and just trying to find some benefits in their current situation to save something. Some other shareholders have accused Ubisoft leadership at mismanaging company and claimed that Tencent benefits from that. Another consultancy company called Heat Detection has come to gamers' attention again. They've worked on Silent Hill 2 remake, which, as fans of this game have noticed, has been subject to some dubious changes that could be attributed specifically to consultancy and their attempts to adapt the game to the infamous modern audiences and somewhat sanitize it. And as you could predict, employees of companies like this usually have dubious reputation with a history of disdain towards gamers. For example, this Heat Detection employee believes that the world would be better without gamers. October was the month when someone from game dev finally schooled gaming journalists. The hero of the day was Thomas Muller, a CEO and creative director at Moon Studios, known for their Ori games. It started when this woman, who was posing as someone affiliated with Ori Games and Moon Studios, rushed to defend wokeness and DEI consultancy. But then Thomas Muller joined the discussion and said that as a director of both Ori Games, he never heard of her. To what she answered that she was working at some department at Xbox, who was publisher of those games. Mueller answered along the lines like, okay, just wanted to make sure people know you are not affiliated with us because you are insulting other people on the internet. And then suddenly Alyssa Mercante appeared, calling Mueller a dickhead. His answer was, I don't know who you are.
You took everything from me.
I don't even know who you are.
Alyssa couldn't find anything better but to remind him about some hit piece Kotaku wrote on Moon Studios a while ago, to what Mueller answered with his now famous post about how game development really works, which I won't read here because it's pretty long, but you can pause video if you want. Anyway, suffice to say that Alyssa disappeared from that discussion forever. CD Projekt Red CEO, who was trying to disprove YouTuber Endymion's video, got himself in a different kind of troubles when he pretty much contradicted his company-own website and policies that CDPR has in place and tried to claim that company hires on merit only. You may check Endymion's video on it, but in 2 words,
you can't go and say you're hiring based only off of merit when you have internship programs that discriminate against men, and you also have stated goals that are uploaded by the official company YouTube account that explicitly say that you want to hire based off of demographics and identity. They're fucking lying. That's it.
Speaking of Asmongold, on October he was temporarily banned from Twitch for some political comments he made about Palestine, which caused tons of debates about Twitch having obvious double standards for their favorite radical left streamers versus everyone else. Ubisoft has experienced some problems with unions in October, with some 700 of their employees going on strike. These could have postponed Ubisoft's next game for a couple of weeks, which is a huge tragedy for a gaming world, so everyone begged those employees to get back to work. Nah, joking, nobody cared. Dragon Age Whaleguard playtester leaked some info on upcoming game for a streamer called Nura. I believe at this time we heard Tash's I'm non-binary for the first time, as playtester and Nura were discussing how weird it sounded in fantasy game. At that time, some people were in doubts whether it truly will be this bad. There were claims that it's all just sensationalist BS and there's no way any character will actually say I'm non-binary. Some people were saying that woke activists are not that lame or that stupid to really do this. As we know now, they are truly capable of doing some great things. Sweet Baby Inc. affiliated game Unknown 9 Awakening is released and joins a group of woke flops. Game can't even reach 300 player peak on Steam. The developer studio, Reflector Entertainment, according to their former employees, seem to be both woke and lazy, and they had a bunch of internal problems. Apparently, Bandai Namco thought they are buying some kind of multimedia franchise. Instead, they bought some cheap crap with irrelevant characters nobody cares about. No idea how you become as big as Bandai Namco and still fail to see through stuff like this. Do they just spray and pray with their money or what? Another SBI affiliated studio, developers of Tales of Kenzera Zao, Surgeon Studios, puts a whole company on pause after they already laid off dozens of people couple months before. Ubisoft disbands the whole team that worked on Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown. This game actually was a very unnecessary flop. First, Ubisoft screwed up with its dubious character who looked like it came from some kind of modern slop for modern audiences. Then it packed it with all the usual Ubisoft BS, like releasing it on its own platform, and then, only when people already started to forget about it, they released it on Steam. But of course with the Nuvo and everyone's favorite third-party account. So they scared everyone they could, and they appealed to the least amount of people they could. Which ended up with this game being a weird case of overall well-received game that isn't bad per se, but too many gamers just didn't care about it because of all the mentioned factors. Upcoming Dragon Age Veilguard got into the news with its stingy review code policies. Essentially, they tried to send it only to people whom they expected to hype up the game. However, it has led to some funny situation like that woman on X who pretended to be queer and got review code because of that and bashed the game after that, but in the same time plenty of big reviewers were ignored. November 2024. First part of November was full of Dragon Age Veilguard related controversies. Game ended up so cringy that it provided many content creators with material for months. In the meantime, journalists, activists, and all kind of shills try to gaslight everyone into believing that the game is perfect. It's a game of the year material, 9 out of 10 minimum, and people who don't praise it have no clue. The infamous copy-paste phrase that many journalists apparently copied from Veilguard's creative director and placed in their reviews, returned to the forum, has become a meme itself. For some time, journalists and wokesters on Reddit really tried to claim that the game was a stunning success, even though Steam chart was showing game being beaten even by Farming Simulator. They fanatically followed this narrative to spite critics until even BioWare couldn't hide its failure anymore. People like Jason Schreier openly admitted that the only reason they care about this game is to dunk on Chads. By the way, when it became apparent that Veilguard is a failure, Jason deleted his tweet. Ubisoft's Assassin's Creed boss, Mark Alexis Cote, has gone on a long rant defending so-called diversity and inclusivity in Assassin's Creed Shadows. He pretty much confirmed that both protagonists are chosen to be messengers of ideological agenda and its vision, and they indeed represent inclusivity and diversity more than anything else, but he tried to present it as some kind of norm, which didn't really improve Ubisoft's positions in any way. Then all the journos and activists had a meltdown when a man who is very very bad and mildly orange won the elections in America, and then they all collectively cried everywhere expecting some kind of new Gestapo to round them up or something like this. Alyssa Mercanti got fired from Kotaku either because of her toxicity or due to purely economic factors. Oh, by the way, not sure when it happened, but remember that Chris Kindred from Sweet Baby Inc.? Apparently he also was fired at some point, or maybe just hidden to prevent unwanted attention. Either way, associating with these individuals was too much even for some of their own ideological allies. Steam and Valve got accused by ADL, the infamous Anti-Defamation League, on being a platform overflooding with horrible racism and all kind of Pepe the Frogs. It was immediately parroted by a host of gaming outlets, and not even one has expressed any kind of skepticism. Nah, they just joined in the call for more censorship. Interestingly enough, 55% of hateful imagery were images of Pepe the Frog. Even more interesting is the fact that if you take a look at the proportion of controversial content in relation to the whole Steam and the amount of content it has, we are talking about some disappearingly low percentage, basically nothing burger. Quite ironic that compared to some edgy teenager who maybe posts Pepe the Frog with an iron cross in a Steam profile or something like this and then never does anything about it in his real life, ADL is actually an organization driven by pure intolerance in real life, with a long history of doxing, silencing critics, deplatforming content creators, ruining careers, influencing politics. and a lot more. And then Obsidian Entertainment art director Matt Hansen has become famous as a woke activist who claimed that he will double down on discriminating against white developers. Then more of his posts resurfaced, which didn't help the case of Obsidian's next game, Avowed, that already got some negative attention with its inclusion of pronouns. Later, Obsidian's co-founder, who has left company in 2014, Chris Avallone, joined the discussion, suggesting that victims of current Obsidian's discriminatory practices might sue the company. He also mentioned BioWare's hiring practices and hinted that they are also very shady and might deserve a lawsuit. Then, when Black Myth Wukong was nominated on Game of the Year, gaming journalists copy-pasted their thoughts and came up with gazillion of articles how this game is extremely dangerous to our... Oh, sorry, wrong script. They all said that the game is lowest rated Game of the Year contender and it doesn't deserve it. Again, I didn't play it, I can't say, but seeing such a united front of journalists, I remember those old leaks about most of these people being in the same email lists and Discord channels, which would explain a lot. December 2024. First, there was a clash between YouTuber Vara Dark and David Jaffe, former game director of God of War games. Unfortunately, David turned into slop enjoyer and slop defender, and he got angry at people critiquing Dragon Age Veilguard and went so far that he claimed that grifters killed that game. And after he was criticized for this quite delusional take, he went on saying these and bunch of other insults.
You just don't know how to do this. You don't know how to do this. You are in that chair, Vera, because of your hair and your face and your gender.
Which was even more ironic since he's positioning himself on that woke and pro-feminist side. Marvel Rivals kept growing to the disappointment of Blizzard and their Overwatch 2, and probably Sony too, as lots of Sony supporters blamed Concord's failure on the assumption that nobody wants to play hero shooters anymore, and suddenly they were forced to acknowledge that comically inclusive roster of characters and their pronouns played significant role in their failure. Naughty Dog released a trailer for their upcoming intergalactic The Heretic Prophet with a very special protagonist that further strengthens people's opinion that Neil Druckmann indeed has horrible taste in women. Trailer was memed and disliked into oblivion, and comments were pretty funny too. The main character looks like it belongs in Concord. The dog isn't naughty anymore. I feel like Will Smith will slap me for making fun of her. This game is going to make a concordillion dollars. Former Blizzard president got into not really a controversy but rather just a funny situation when he called Marvel Rivals a clone of Overwatch, but used as an argument alleged similarity between Marvel Black Widow and Widowmaker in Overwatch, which was strange because it's obviously a very different characters. As for his comment about Chinese clones, well, maybe this point would sound better if Western developers were at their prime, but as they work tirelessly to make everything lame, people will always stick to cooler games even if they copy gameplay mechanics. Who is preventing Western developers from making their originals great again and actually attractive to players? Pretty sure that in general, majority of Western gamers would prefer companies from their own countries if they had a possibility to receive cool products from them instead of sloppy propaganda. Witcher 4 lore designer Kian Mar, who was a gaming journalist before he weaseled his way into CDPR, was exposed as gamer-hating woke activist. I have a video with all his tweets on this channel, so not gonna repeat them all, but suffice to say that he is now known as CDPR dev who wants to punch gamers. Former Kotaku senior editor Alyssa Mercante has filed a lawsuit against YouTuber SmashJT. She also made sure to dox him by sharing the lawsuit with his personal information on it, while removing her own information on basis of safety concerns. Journalist remains a journalist, I guess. Director and writer of Kingdom Come Deliverance, Daniel Vavra, has caused a disturbance among Veilguard shills when he boasted on X that his 7-year-old game is doing better than recently released Veilguard. He was accused of being really bad mini and being loser and being insensitive and many other things, but judging by his savage replies, he wasn't particularly concerned with Veilguard's defenders. Okay, that's it. Finally, we went through all of this. Not gonna lie, at some point I kinda regretted my ambitious goal, but hopefully it will serve as a useful archive of some sorts. Also, shout out to John F. Trent, who has been archiving all that stuff while writing for That Park Place, and I believe he moved to Fandom Pulse now and writes there mostly. Without his articles, making videos like this would be much harder. Anyway, share, like, comment, and add controversies I missed so this video and its comment section can become one big archive of controversies and interesting stuff. I see you later.